So, good afternoon. Today I am going to talk to you about measuring unemployment. Unemployment is one of the four main measures that we look at to measure economic performance. When we have a high level of unemployment, we have, of course, we're inside our production possibilities frontier, possibly. And if that's the case, that's going to cause problems. So let's first talk about measuring it, and then we'll talk about what kind of problems we're trying to avoid with dealing with unemployment. So for now, we're going to be doing measuring unemployment. Now, there are different agencies that measure unemployment, but the main agency that we have doing that is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Gallup, of course, does their own measures, but they're not a government agency. But they can, oftentimes, they will measure unemployment in a similar fashion. But the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, what they start with is what they call the Current Population Survey. And the Current Population Survey, they measure, they take surveys of something like about 60,000 people every single month, and they've been doing this since just after World War II. And generally, most of the people that they survey are not, they're only on there for a few months. They're rotated on and off the survey after a few months, and they're given a short survey. But then there are a much smaller group of people who are surveyed that are rotated on and off the Current Population Survey over a couple of years. And they're given a longer survey, and this is how they kind of capture trends and things of that sort, what's going on in terms of unemployment. Now, this is independent of the agencies that are responsible for handling unemployment compensation. So when they have questions on there regarding, like on the unemployment agency or the employment agency, when they have questions on their surveys that they ask people, whether or not they worked in the past week and whether or not they look for work, that's for purposes of collecting unemployment. This is not for the purposes that the survey that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is working off of. All right, now anytime that you want to have a statistics, like in this case, unemployment, and this is going to be true for all of the measures that we take of the economy's performance, like for instance our gross domestic product, CPI, the current, which is the consumer price index. Those things, anytime we have a statistics, you have to be mindful of the fact that a statistic is like taking a photo. For instance, let's say I take a photo of a group of people or a class, and they're all from the class. Now, assuming I don't doctor it up, it is accurate in that it represents whatever was in front of the camera. For instance, if somebody had something on their shirt, I could probably report that they had that item on their shirt. However, let's say somebody had something on the back of their shirt. Well, I'm not going to be able to see that in the photo. It doesn't matter whether the photo is accurate in as far as what it shows. I can't see it in the photo. And that's the way it is with statistics. They do take a picture of what's out there fairly as accurately as we can. It's not perfect, but it's as close to being accurate as it can be. But it's it doesn't represent everything. And that's the catch when we do these measures. We kind of have to keep it in the back of our mind. Okay, so what does this statistic actually measure? What does it capture within that measure? And then, okay, if it captures that, does it capture all of the things that we really like to know that are behind our reasons for measuring that particular, having that kind of measure in the first place? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to first go through, I'm going to show you how the actual measure is done, and then we're going to ask ourselves, does it capture what we want to know? Okay? So, because it's a statistic and it's done by statistically sound methods, the first thing we have to do is we have to define a population. So we're going to have our population. So our population is going to be it includes the population includes, if I can get this thing to type, it includes all non-institutionalized. I think this is one of the longest words I spell in this course. Civilians age 16 and over. Okay, so our population includes that 99-year-old great-great-grandmother who spends her days rocking on her porch and, in front of her house in Georgia, knitting booties for her great-great-grandchildren. Okay? Yeah, we don't really expect her to be working, but we want to make sure that if there's any possibility that she has a job, that we are incorporating that person into our population. We want to make sure we have a fairly well-defined population here. We know exactly who we're talking about. Okay. And of course, it's non-institutionalized and civilians. We don't want to talk about the military because the military is a separate thing, but aside from that, anybody who is in the military is working anyway. So, but that's a different status. So we're just going to exclude that in this number. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to break our population down into two categories, well, three categories actually, but we're gonna break it down into, we're gonna talk about two categories overall and one category, two categories as subcategories. So let's talk about the two subcategories. So there's the employed. And the employed are all those who we'll go back and describe these people. Okay, so this is all those who look for a job. Oh, excuse me. I don't know why I'm thinking all those who look for a job. I'm getting ahead of myself. I stop thinking. All right, all those who worked for pay or had a job to return to anytime during the reference week. So what is this reference week? The reference week is the week that the 12th of the month falls in. Okay, and so we're going to compare, like for instance, the week that September, the 12th of September falls in with the week that the 12th of August falls in and the week that the 12th of July falls in. So we're going to have comparisons from different months based on that 1 week, okay? So that's our reference week. All right. Now, in addition to our employed, of course, we're going to have another group, which we're going to call our unemployed. So this is going to be plus now, the unemployed includes all those who did not work but looked for work during the reference week. Okay, so anybody that did not work but they looked, that's considered the unemployed. Now, these people who fall into these two categories here, these people are called the labor force. Okay, so we're going to call these two groups combined the labor force. Okay, so there are obviously some people who are not working and are not looking for work. Like that 99-year-old great-great-grandmother, we know that she's not employed, and we know she's not looking for work, so she's not considered to be unemployed. So, but she is in the population. So what we're going to do is we're going to take into account all those people who are in the population. We're going to add to this all those who were in the population that are not in the labor force. Okay, so now we've covered everybody that's in our population. We've got the employed, the unemployed, and then everybody else that's in the population. And the population, of course, includes everybody who is non-institutionalized civilian over the age of 16. So now we've collected all this information, we've sorted it out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put them together in a way to do a calculation of what our unemployment rate is. So the first number that we want to look at is our unemployment rate. Now, to calculate the unemployment rate, what I'm going to do is first off, I'm going to abbreviate unemployment. And that's so that, because of course, the unemployment, unemployment is a really long word, and I really hate writing it 20,000 times over. Okay, so let's say that the number of people who are employed is, well, first off, let me just tell you what the unemployment rate is. What we're going to do is we're going to take the number unemployed and then we're going to divide that by the number that is in the labor force. Okay, so, and then this whole thing is going to be times 100. Because we're trying to find out a percentage, okay? So anytime we want a rate, we think of it as a percentage in this case. And so this is our unemployment rate. We take the number unemployed, these people here that fall into the second category under labor force, and we divide it by the total. Now, let's go back to that whole idea. The unemployment rate captures some things that are what we really want to measure. But then again, there's always something that doesn't get captured in some of these things because it's only one snapshot. So what is it that we're really interested in knowing when we measure the unemployment rate? Well, the first thing is we want to know the following. Let's say that this is our PPF, okay? And this is the nation's PPF. So here's all other goods, and this is good A. Okay? So this is the nation's PPF. Now, there are cases in which we are operating on our PPF, but we'll probably still have some unemployment, and we'll talk about that in another discussion. But for now, mainly what we want to know is our economy just have a minimal amount of unemployment because people are moving around from to such so that we're producing on our production possibilities frontier, someplace on that, okay? That's really what we want to do. We want to be able to have the economy have a robust enough activity going on that everybody who wants to work could work. There's at least a job out there for them. We don't really know, they may be between jobs or something, but there's that possibility anyways. They could be working. The kind of unemployment, however, that we want to know about is the unemployment in which we find ourselves inside our PPF. Because what that means is that the economy is not actually, there's not enough activity going on in the economy to use all the resources that we have. And when we'll talk about what's the problem with that, for instance. What's the problem with the fact that we're inside our PPF and we're not producing enough output? I've talked to a number of people and I say, you know, how many of you know somebody who has so much stuff that they can't even put their car in their garage? And invariably there's always somebody that knows someone in that situation. So sometimes, you know, we see things going on. We look at it and we say, well, so what if we're not on our PPF? We don't have to be constantly on our PPF. What's the problem with that? I mean, really, how much production do we really have to worry about that we're not producing? Come on. I mean, we got enough stuff. Well, the problem is this. During the last Great Recession, one of the issues happened is that, of course, the whole state of California saw a significant decline in the amount of production going on in the state. And as a consequence, the state was collecting less in the way of taxes, particularly income taxes, to the point where every year for several years we had these huge holes in our state budget, you know, billions of dollars shortfall that the state government had to figure out how to fill. They had to figure out, well, let's see, we don't have as much money coming in, so how are we going to handle this? Are we going to cut spending, or are we going to have to increase taxes? Well, the state did. There was an attempt to increase taxes, but there are certain people that absolutely refuse to increase taxes. They don't want that. So there was enough of them that wouldn't increase taxes that the state couldn't do it. Couldn't get a tax increase at all. So the only thing that the state could do then was to cut spending. So what did they do? They cut spending on everything that they had any kind of discretion. They cut all the things that they could that were in the general fund. The only thing that the state did not cut spending on, and that was for prisons. They cut education and social programs and money for, putting people to work doing stuff like working on the roads and Caltrans, and I mean they cut it across the board. They were cutting from the post-secondary education, like the UCs, the Cal States, and the California community colleges, billions of dollars. Billions, you know, $1 billion 1 year, $1 billion another year, and of course, as a consequence, students would be looking around for courses like, can we get a course in the summertime? And they'd find out that getting a class at the California community colleges in the summertime is just about impossible. Students that were in the UCs or the Cal States, they found that there was so much in the way of cutbacks that some of them were having a hard time getting the courses they needed just to graduate. It hung up their whole education and delayed their ability to, finish. So clearly it was a problem. It was a problem for a lot of people, and so when you're talking about producing inside of our production possibilities frontier, in those cases where we have that kind of unemployment, we're not getting the production we could potentially have. And that means that all of us have to figure out, well, what don't we get? Okay, we can't have everything anymore. We have a smaller pie to split amongst ourselves, and sometimes it really hurts. So that's one problem about being inside our PPF. Another problem with being inside our PPF, when we have that kind of unemployment, it means that there are people who are unemployed that no matter what they do, they could really work very hard just to find a job, but they're not going to find one because there's just not enough jobs to go around. It's like musical chairs. The music stopped playing, the economy's just not producing the jobs, and so there's a whole bunch of people that still standing, not able to get a job. Now, who are these people? Well, a good portion of these people who were not able to find jobs were young people who were coming out of high school, coming out of college, and just generally young people between the ages of 16 and 25. This was an age group that saw significant amounts of unemployment during our Great Recession. Now, is that a problem? Well, yeah, there's a lot of problems with that. Students who went to college and borrowed money, for instance, to pay for their education, now had to figure out how they were going to pay back the loans. And that was one problem. That was kind of, that was the chance that they took. Some of them didn't realize how big a chance it was that they took. A second part of it is, and this was really critical, that a lot of young people did not have the opportunities to develop the job skills that they needed to be able to compete in the work world. And as a consequence, those jobs, there was kind of a loss of skills that still having an impact. For instance, when people don't get to work for a significant period of time, hey, we forget stuff. And a couple of years back, after a few years after the recession really set in, the Navy Yards down in San Diego were looking to hire welders. But the problem was they couldn't find welders because of the people who had been doing welding before the recession. They'd had a few years in which they had not been doing any welding. A lot of them, their credentials or certifications for welding had kind of lapsed, or they just weren't, practiced at it, what have you. Now, when you have a whole young generation that just doesn't really get started in their careers and in the job world, what happens is it has a long-term effect because it takes years to recover from that loss of skills. That loss of also confidence. People, there was a study that some students, a student gave me an article. It was about a study that was done in England, Great Britain or whatever, about the effects of unemployment on a whole cohort. So you say you have a young generation, a group of people between the ages of 16 and 24, and they go and enter the labor market, and they can't find a job. Well, they start feeling a lack of confidence in themselves. And when you don't have confidence in yourself, and you go out looking for work, the employer says, well, what the heck, that person not really feel confident in themselves about, usually that means they have something that, I don't want. Forget it, I'm not going to hire them. And so it worked against them for a long time. It took something like about it took something like about, I think it was, if I recall rightly, it was about 20 years for that group to catch up to their peers who did have jobs when they got out of school and started making the kinds of income. So it has these long-term effects on people's self-esteem and how well. There's also the problem that happened during our Great Recession when there weren't enough jobs to go around, when we had that kind of unemployment. And that was, we had a lot of people lost their homes, people who were in the middle of their lives who lost their jobs found that, they couldn't feed their kids. They didn't have money for many of the basic things that they needed. And that total loss of income was hard to deal with. They didn't know what to do. It was really devastating to a lot of people. And some people have such a difficult time dealing with it. They're so stressed out by that kind of thing that there's an increase in suicides when you have an event like that where there's a lot of people who lose jobs. So unemployment has lots of problems, particularly the kind of unemployment in which we're inside our PPF. So some of the problems that we're talking about are would be like loss of production. By the way, that loss of production in California is going to have very long-term effects. It goes years. I mean, it has years of effect because of compounding. Loss of self-esteem. Loss of skills. Loss of income for families. And loss of some people and suicide, or increase in suicides. So it's definitely something that you want to, the policymakers really want to deal with and want to address this, okay? So now let's talk about the unemployment rate. We want to know whether or not this statistic that we have, that we're going to have here, where we take the number of unemployed and divide it by the labor force, right? Is it going to address, is it going to capture the problem? If there's a problem where we're actually inside our PPF, is it going to actually capture that? Let's take a look at what goes into that measure. It says that the employed are all those who work for pay or had a job to return to anytime during the reference week. So you could be employed, but you might not be working very many hours. Maybe you're only working part-time. That's one of the big problems with the way in which things are done now. There are a lot of people who weren't working as many hours as they would like. And so it wasn't capturing that kind of underemployment, okay? And let's say you were a person who did have a college degree. Well, you were maybe able to compete for a job, that you did have a college degree. Maybe you got out of college. And you were able to compete against all those people who hadn't gotten out of college. They didn't get a college degree. So you did get a job, but you got the job waiting tables down at the local restaurant, okay? You didn't get a career job here. And so you were actually underemployed in the sense that the job that you were doing was not utilizing the full breadth of your skills. And so during a recession, we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more people who are captured in this employed number who really are, really we're not utilizing and would be indicative of us being inside the PPF, but it's not showing up in our unemployment rate because they're considered employed. Okay? And another part of the measure, which is a challenge, which kind of throws it off. One of the things that happens, especially during a recession, is that people stop working completely. They give up looking. They just figure, you know what, I'm not going to get anything. I've looked. I've been looking for a year and a half. I haven't found a job. Forget it. I'm never going to get another job. That's just it. That's the end of my work life. And so they're no longer looking for a job, and so they're no longer considered to be part of the labor force. They're over here in this category of all those in the population that are not in the labor force. Some of those people who end up in that category go back to school. That's one of the things that frequently happens during a recession or a downturn, is that people try to improve their job skills. They don't like to just not go without work. They want to still do something to, keep things going. But many of these people are just plain discouraged. They've just given up, okay? And so this unemployment rate doesn't capture it. It will be really, really high sometimes. During a recession, like we did get into double-digit unemployment in the state of California, which is high, okay? But it didn't capture the whole problem. If you really want to get a better picture on the problem, there's another measure that we can turn to. And this measure is called the labor force participation rate. Now, the way we calculate this the way we go about calculating it is we take I think, yeah, okay. We take the number in the labor force and we divide it by the number in the population. And of course, again, because it's a rate, we're going to multiply it by 100. Okay, so that's our labor force participation rate. Now, what this is going to tell us is it's going to tell us something about the people that are over here in category 3 here, where it says all those in the population that are not in the labor force, we're going to see if it's a really large portion of our population. And so it's going to kind of capture whether or not we have a significant number of discouraged workers. One of the interesting things is that now, in the current period that we have going on now, that our unemployment numbers, our unemployment rate has actually gone down quite a bit. It's been several years since we went into a recession. And so we've recovered quite a bit. Our unemployment rate is down, you know, into 5-point-something%. In some places it's below 5%. So it's really, which is considered to be a really good rate, because that's what we would expect about the numbers of people moving from job to job and things of that sort. We expect a certain amount of turnover in the job market. And so there will be people who are always looking for work, etc. But the interesting thing is our labor force participation rate is low relative to what it is historically. Now, some of that is accounted for the fact that many baby boomers are about ready to retire or are getting into their retirement years. And so we would expect that the numbers who are, you know, in the population, but they're not in the labor force, are going to get bumped up. So that labor force participation rate is going to start getting smaller just because of that. But it doesn't really account for all of that. But typically, historically, it's in the high 60 percentiles. It's like, you know, 65, 66 percentile, maybe even as much as 67 percentile, the labor force participation rate. More recently, it's down in the low 60s. And like I said, the baby booms generation and getting into their retirement years has pushed it down there, but not all of it. And so there is this concern that there's probably a significant pool of discouraged workers out there who have not really recovered from this, you know, this last Great Recession. And it's not clear if, you know, that's a pretty stubborn number, and it's really hard to get these people back into position. Now, some of this is probably due to what we call structural unemployment, which I'll talk about later. But it's difficult to assess why there is a problem there. A third thing is that the labor force participation rate still doesn't capture those people who are considered to be employed, but they're not, they're working part-time, they're not working as many hours as they'd like, or they are working at jobs which are not paying, you know, are underemploying them. And there's some concern that we're really been very slow at recovering that. When the unemployment rate finally fell below 6%, everybody was, you know, cheering, and, you know, I mean, this was great news. This was really great news. Everybody was happy that finally the economy had come around where we were getting down to unemployment numbers that were reasonable and to be expected. But when we did, there was this guy from Gallup. Gallup, of course, is that polling company that does all kinds of polls. And he said that the unemployment rate was a fraud. And everybody's saying, a fraud? You think the government is lying to us and just covering up problems? And he said, no, that's not why I think it's a fraud. He said, the reason why I consider it to be a fraud is because it's not really capturing the real problems that are still out there in the economy. He said they had, the Gallup does a lot of their own unemployment and employment numbers. And one of the numbers that they had, what they called U6, was up around 11% at the time. And what that captured is it captured some of this underemployed, part-time people and things of that sort. And he was saying that as long as that was in the double digits, the economy was not doing well. And not only that, but we were not really going to have a healthy middle class if we didn't get it down to at least 9%. Because he said that the reason that that number was as high as it was is because we had people out there, lots of families, who had to patch together part-time jobs. They didn't get benefits. They weren't getting, all the, income that they needed, even from the combined jobs that they had. And so it was really holding them back. It was really making it difficult for them to, to get by. And that was the reason why that underemployment number was that U6 number was still in the double digits. And I heard recently that it is down now well below the 10% mark, but this is one of the trends that had happened in the United States. And of course, when you have a recession like we had, which was a really, really deep recession, that number really, a lot of people ended up having only part-time work. Employers didn't lay everybody off, but what they did do is they cut their hours if they could. They were really doing everything just to reduce the amount that they had to pay for workers and reduce the amount of hours that that they had. It was a challenge. It really was a challenge for a lot of families to get by, and it's only now starting to register in numbers that are healthy numbers. We're also finally hearing, according to the census, this past week they put out a report that wages in 2015, household incomes had risen in 2015 by a significant percent. However, even that was not like evenly across the board. There were many people who were living more in rural areas that weren't seeing their incomes go up. But we're getting all the signs that the job market and our workforce, that part of our economy is finally starting to get healthy again. But it's taken a long, long time. And that's why it's really important to pay attention to these numbers. Okay, so I'm going to finish there, and I will talk to you about the different types of unemployment and then different recording.